Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sportsbeat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.
Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by the Hard Truth Distilling Company in Brown County, Indiana.
So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world,
time! 3 on the way. Oh! It went in! It went in! And Indiana wins the ball game! Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni! Float game for the win! Ayla's gone! Goodbye, touchdown, Indy! Woo! IU! America! They got a football team now!
Pretty simple. I win. Google me.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Now, from the Hard Truth Studios, here's Jim Coyle.
Zach Osterman from the Indy Star will get his viewpoints on some things as the season is wrapping up for Indiana. It looks like they're most likely out of the tournament. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, the beat writer, IU Insider, joins us now. Make sure you keep local papers alive. Be a subscriber. Give Zach a follow. Zachary, I thought Indiana was going to make it in, but it appears because of some of the late games yesterday, the teams that won, they may be pushed out now.
Yeah, I mean they're certainly in, they are certainly, I think, at best going to be sweating some of this. And I think that the two that I would look at most closely that are still alive in their conference tournaments among bubble teams are probably Texas and Colorado State, maybe Boise State too. Actually, maybe make that 3. But then you also have, the potential for a bid thief. Dayton, for example, could make a run in the A-10 tournament. You've got the Big West where, UC San Diego might have an argument for an at-large berth if it doesn't make it into the tournament as the conference champion. That's not a conference that tends to produce, so it tends to be a multi-bid league. But I guess for people who, and we don't need to get too in the weeds with this, but for people who may not know, UC San Diego has just had like a crazy good season. Eric Olin, the coach out there, actually is someone who's been mentioned to me very, very sort of like sparingly as someone Indiana should take a look at. And I haven't looked too much into him, but I mean, this is like this is a program that historically speaking, I think they've only been in Division I for like 5 years. I think that's right. And they are 28-4. They're in the top, I think, 30 or the top 48 rather in KenPom. They're in a conference with UC Irvine, which is 27-5, but probably doesn't have necessarily quite the resume that UC San Diego does. The point is, the Big West is historically just a one big league, and this year it could be 2. My best guess right now is that the likeliest outcome here is Indiana gets bumped out. And that's because of what I think might continue to happen elsewhere. Now, a bunch of other bubble teams also lost yesterday. Arkansas lost, Baylor lost, Xavier lost, Nova lost, Wake Forest lost, SMU. I'm not really sure SMU was in the bubble, but I know they lost as well. So, you at least pared the field down somewhat. And the other thing I would say is what I always say is we don't know exactly how the committee is going to, separate these teams. It always has to look for, sort of points of comparison that it can cast across the entire bubble field to be able to separate them. And those always change a little bit year to year because teams' resumes are a little bit different year to year. And if it winds up, for example, that quality road wins is something that separates, the committee uses to separate these teams, well, then Indiana might have a shot. Because for a bubble team, Indiana's got a surprising number, 3 quad 1 road wins. If it's, something like you know, quad 2 and 3 records, well, Indiana's perfect outside of quad 1. But if it's, you know, maybe the most fundamental data point of all, which is just how many quality wins do you have, Indiana doesn't have a lot. They've beaten 2 teams that are likely to be in the field. They're 4-13 or 4-14 now, I forget, in quad 1 games. You know, if you're asking me what the likeliest outcome is, I think probably it's them getting bumped out, but we'll see.
Well, and if that is the case, do they play in the Crown tournament or do they decline? Are they able to decline? Do they request a waiver with the Crown starting later and Indiana being in the midst of a coaching search? If the coach that they are looking to hire becomes freed up by his team losing, I'm sure they're going to want to make that change as soon as possible, and extending Indiana's season may kind of obscure that or interfere with that.
Yeah, I would be very, very surprised if Indiana's season continues outside the NCAA tournament. You know, last year Indiana made no bones about having no interest in the NIT. I think everybody's still trying to figure out exactly what the CBB crown is, like in practical terms. I know we know what it is, but like in practical terms, you know, like what
the question
how
is
how does
are
the
you
money get split up? And you
but
know,
are you required to play in it? Because
yeah, I think. I mean, if there was a year, certainly to basically ask out of it. I mean, from Indiana's perspective, and it's worth saying, CBB Crown is organized entirely by Fox, which does not have any presence in the NCAA tournament space. Fox has no media rights within the NCAA tournament at all. So it's basically just Fox trying to get, I think it's fair to say, a significant number of, you know, pretty good, you know, good brand teams, because it's supposed to be just like the Big 10, the Big East, and the Big 12, I think. So basically Fox affiliated high major conferences, which means name brand, you know, non-NCAA tournament programs, to come out to Vegas, play a short tournament, you know, plaster it all over television, pay everybody a bunch of money to do it, and see if you can't build something that at least not necessarily rivals the NCAA tournament, but at least kind of gives Fox a bit of a foothold in the basketball, the men's basketball postseason. But because it's all organized completely by Fox, that means that, you know, if Indiana needs to go to the Big 10 and say, hey, listen, this year of all years, we just really cannot be in that tournament, then it will be very easy for the Big 10, Indiana, and if necessary, Fox, to all get in the same proverbial room together. And again, just have a very frank conversation about Indiana. You know, we are in the middle of a coaching search. Once the season ends, once the coaching hire is made, we have to move so quickly through roster management and rebuilding as quickly as possible, and we're going to have to hit the portal and yada, yada, yada. My point here is Indiana, I think, has every case for being able to, if it needs to sort of play, you know, the one-time card of, please just don't let us do this year. Don't make us do this year. You know, it can do that. I would just be, and you know, you never say never with anything around this time of year. I would just be very, very surprised.
Yeah, I agree.
If Indiana participates in a postseason that is not the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, there's too much going on, and with the program, and that makes complete and total sense. That's what I was thinking all along. I just didn't know the actual. Wondering about the requirements, since it's the first year, we really don't know. But now all eyes will turn to, not that they have left, but the coaching search. I have to think that Scott is where, you know, he wants to be as far as knowing his top 4 guys or whatever. And that process has to probably be pretty far along at this point. And I don't know when an announcement would come. It could come in second weekend after the second weekend of the tournament or after the Final Four, but it's got to come in that range because the portal's opening up. You've got all kinds of things that are happening that are affecting it, wanting to get the new coach named and all of that. There's a lot that has to happen kind of quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he being Scott Dolson, I think you're right. I think he's probably at least in sort of the advanced stages of vetting some specific candidates. I think we're past the point now of, the search firm casting a wide net, doing a lot of background, doing a lot of sort of, casual or surface level conversation with agents and things. I think we're probably at a point where Indiana at least has a good idea of kind of the candidates it wants to focus its attention on here at the end. Does that mean, it's clear, somebody mentioned Ben McCollum a little while ago. Is Ben McCollum the clear number one? I'm not sure it's quite at that point yet in terms of, I'm not sure that Indiana's sort of actively saying it's him. And then if it's not him, then it's him. And then if it's not him, then it's him and so forth. And these things, never work quite in that such a linear way. So, you also allow for that as well. But, what I would say is that I would, again, if you want to talk about just what I kind of expect, I would be surprised if Indiana does not enter next week with an action plan. And obviously they're not going to share that publicly, but a plan to essentially say whenever target number one season ends, we have all the ducks in a row, everything lined up. The search firm has helped confirm details of potential contracts and things so that we can just sort of snap our fingers and go, and just dive right in. I mean, like I wrote something earlier this week where I look back at the timelines for last season, and there were 4 jobs that I think were kind of at least loosely connected to Dusty May, who was probably the biggest domino in the coaching carousel last season. Ohio State filled on March 17th. Dusty May's season ended on March 22nd. He was announced as Michigan's head coach on March 24th. Vanderbilt announced Mark Byington the next day. And Pat Kelsey was announced 3 days after that. So, and there was certainly a sense at the time that Ohio State, at very least, was sort of trying to decide between Dusty May and Jake Diebler, and maybe Ohio State decided on Diebler. Maybe Ohio State got wind that Dusty May was going to go in a different direction. Either way, the point was, that is 11 days for 4 jobs to get filled, all keying off one decision. And in particular, if you think about it, I think FAU's season ended, on a Friday. By the following Thursday, 3 jobs that had all been connected to Dusty May had all filled. That is how quickly it's going to move. And Indiana is going to be the program that in all likelihood sets that pace. So it is not, it is not something where I expect Indiana to have to really move at somebody else's timeline. But I do think that Indiana, I suspect Indiana will enter the NCAA tournament with a plan of action for what to do and how to move once target number one is out of the tournament and therefore available.
And we don't know. That's the one thing we do not know is who target number one is. We all have speculated and I'm not really speculating on who target number one is because I'll tell you straight up, I don't know. There's too many couple of good options there at the top. But one of those that some people love, some people hate, Ben McCollum. He's also going to be coveted by Iowa if they make a move, which they are likely to do, but not for sure. But if they do, that could impact this only because he's from Iowa. There's a strong possibility he might want to go to Iowa instead of come to Indiana.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, that's kind of what the search firm is for. is to be able to say, either A, we've talked to McCollum's representation. The Iowa stuff's overblown. He thinks Indiana's. Just in this hypothetical,
Right.
you and I are not saying it's going to be Ben McCollum, but the Iowa stuff's overblown. He thinks Indiana's a better opportunity. He wants to have the conversation, evaluate the program. Any coach is going to look at the roster, is going to look at the resources, is going to look at the 3 to 5 year outlook and make sure that they're comfortable. You're not just. You don't dive into a new job when you have some leverage in your old job. You don't dive into a new job just completely blind. But then at the end of that process through the firm, it can be kind of confirmed. Yes, he wants the job. Once the season ends, the contract can move fast. We can get him on a private jet. He's landing at Monroe County Airport, waving to people on the tarmac, and it's all again happening in a very, very quickly. Or the search firm can find the other thing, which is, hey, actually, it does seem like Iowa's going to open. Although I know Fran McCaffrey said Thursday night that he expects to be back next year. We shall see. But the search firm can, talk to, again, representatives, lawyers, agents, whoever, and say, hey, actually, Iowa's probably going to open. If it does, he grew up an Iowa fan. He was born in Iowa City. That job has always just been a special job. He's going to go there instead. And then Indiana can move on without ever having, publicly courted and failed in publicly courting Ben McCollum. Indiana can just move that. Whenever this is why every AD says, I only ever sat down with one candidate. I only interviewed one candidate. And it's because everything was conducted through third-party negotiations for the purposes of plausible deniability, so that when coach walks into room with athletic director and university president or chancellor or whoever, and everybody sits down, all the really relevant stuff that might hang up a hire has been dealt with, has been solved or pushed off the table or just otherwise resolved. And by the time you get to that point, it would take an awful lot to break down the potential for a hire. So my point is, yes, Iowa could affect McCollum's thinking if Indiana wanted to make him choice number one, but he actually favored the Iowa job. But having said that, that is the sort of thing that would play out privately. And then, maybe in 2 or 3 years, somebody would be writing a story and just casually say, oh, and he considered the Indiana job, but Iowa was home, like something like that. But like in the here and now, one of the reasons you retain the search firm is so that all that can happen behind the scenes. So a coach is never publicly rejected by a program, and a program's never publicly rejected by a coach.
Absolutely. And another question is it possible that it ends up being somebody that we're not talking about? I mean, the likelihood is there. I don't know how likely it actually is that that could be kept under wraps, and then no one else would think about it, but I'm sure it's a possibility.
I mean, I absolutely think it's absolutely a possibility. I think, that sort of theory has kind of followed this search pretty much since its inception. And I think the primary reason why is because Indiana's done a really good job of keeping its circle tight. I have heard pretty reliably, if admittedly secondhand, that moneyed boosters aren't being kept in the loop for the most part. The former players, can't get that is how kind of tight Scott Dolson is keeping the circle of trust at the moment. That, even some of the people you would expect him to share at least some details of this search with, he's just not. And I think he's, he deserves credit for that. And, listen, so a lot of the time, I think when there's that noise vacuum, people rush to fill it. When there's that information vacuum, people rush to fill it. And I think one of the things that has maybe filled it, quote unquote, is this perception that maybe that means that Dolson's keeping it close to the vest because, all of this is a smoke screen and he's got another mystery candidate over here that he wants to hire that nobody's thinking about. And that does happen like that. Let's not, and that doesn't mean that mystery candidate is Brad Stevens, but let's say it's just like a sitting head coach somewhere that nobody thinks is unhappy in his current job that you look at and say, oh, we're not even going to consider him because there's no way he'd leave the job he's in. But actually, through back channels, through search firm, through whatever, he's expressed interest in that conversations. Those conversations have been had, and Indiana has reciprocated, and that process is being kept, tightly guarded so it doesn't get out. What's equally possible, if not maybe more so, is just the reality that, the possibility that essentially because Dolson is doing a good job of keeping the search quiet, people are filling the information vacuum with rumors that are taking hold. Because listen, it's kind of exciting, right? Like it's exciting to, there's a reason why on the game show sometimes you pick what's behind the mystery door. It's because that's exciting. You don't know what's there. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, but it is just human nature to sort of wonder about what you don't know, like the unknown and the possibility of the unknown, the risk, but also the reward. And I think that what's probably more likely when you hear these rumors about like a mystery candidate is that that's more just reflective of kind of people filling the information vacuum and that sort of taking hold and spreading roots, even though maybe there's not much behind it.
Yeah, the only time we're going to know for sure is when Scott Dolson makes that announcement, and
right.
And like I said, he has done a marvelous job keeping it under wraps. And
if memory serves, in 2006, no one saw Kelvin Sampson coming, and I was a sophomore in college. I don't remember. No, I was a freshman in college, so I don't remember that vividly. But if memory serves, it was a lot of talk of Tom Crean, John Beeline, and Steve Alford, and no one really saw Sampson coming. So that kind of high, it's that kind of hire essentially.
Probably didn't see Sampson coming because he just got caught cheating in Oklahoma. They didn't expect it. No. So now where does your attention turn? Obviously, with the season most likely over, the coaching search is the focal point for everything, I would assume, even for you.
Yeah, I think I'll probably be back up at the Big Ten tournament at some point this weekend. And then there's regional games in Indy this year, which is always kind of fun to cover. It's always fun to get out. Like it's, when you work a beat, you're not cheering for the team that you cover, but your fortunes, your attentions, your sort of professional energy is all focused on whatever happens or doesn't happen on your beat. It's always kind of fun to detach from that a little bit and just go look for a good story. Just wander into a locker room that you've never met anybody before and, just kind of find something interesting, find something compelling and, write the heck out of that as best you can for a weekend. So I'll probably be up there, but no, a lot of it is just going to be the search and it's probably going to resolve itself. Again, I would suggest pretty quickly unless something goes wrong.
I would agree. Zach Osterman, beat writer for the IU beat writer for the Indy Star. Be a subscriber. Keep local papers alive. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you, brother. I'm sure I'll see you back up in Indy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Thank you, Zach. Zach Osterman joined us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. And hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.